The first reading is from Joshua. The Lord said to Joshua, "Today I have rolled away from you the disgrace of Egypt." While the children of Israel were camped in Gilgal, they kept the Passover in the evening on the 14th day in the month in the plains of Jericho. On the day after the Passover, on that very day, they ate the produce of the land, unleavened cakes and parched grain. The manna ceased on the day that they ate the produce of the land, and the children of Israel no longer had manna. They ate the crops of the land of Canaan that year. The word of the Lord, reconciliation to us. So we are ambassadors for Christ, since God is making his appeal through us. We entreat that you, on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God. For our sake, God has made Christ to be sin who knew no sin, so that is, in Christ, we might become the righteousness of God. The word
Gospel according to Luke. Tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to listen to Jesus. But the Pharisees and scribes began to complain, saying, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." So to them, Jesus addressed this parable. A man had 2 sons. And the younger son said to his father, "Father, give me the share of your estate that should come to me." And so their father divided the property between them. After a few days, the younger son collected all his belongings and set off to a distant country. And there he squandered his inheritance on a life of dissipation. When he had freely spent everything, a severe famine struck that country, and he found himself in dire need. So he hired himself out to one of the local citizens, who sent him to his farm to tend the swine. And he longed to eat his fill of the pods on which the swine fed, but nobody gave him any. Coming to his senses, he thought, "How many of my father's hired workers have more than enough food to eat? But here am I, dying from hunger. I shall get up and go to my father, and I shall say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. Treat me as you would treat one of your hired workers.' So he got up and went back to his father. And while he was still a long way off, his father caught sight of him and was filled with compassion. He ran to his son, embraced him, and kissed him. His son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son.' But his father ordered his servants, 'Quickly, bring the finest robe and put it on him, and put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Take the fattened calf, slaughter it, then let us celebrate with a feast. Because this son of mine who was dead has come to life again. He was lost and has been found.' Then the celebration began. Now the older son, who had been out in the field and on his way back as he neared the house, he heard the sound of music and dancing. He called one of the servants and asked what this might mean, and the servant said to him, 'Your brother has returned, and your father has slaughtered the fattened calf because he has him back safe and sound.' He became angry, and when he refused to enter his house, the father came out and pleaded with him. He said to his father and replied, 'Look, all these years I served you, and not once did I disobey your orders. You never gave me even a young goat to feast on with my friends. But when your son returns, who swallowed up your property with prostitutes, for him you slaughtered the fattened calf.' He said to him, 'My son, you are here with me always. Everything I have is yours. But now we must celebrate and we must rejoice because your brother was dead and has come to life again. He was lost and has been found. This, my friends, is the good news according to the gospel that we've all heard on many, many occasions. And you've probably heard all sorts of interpretations and explanations. But you know what I found really neat about these gospel readings this season, in terms of our theme, our journey to the cross, is this thread that's woven through them, and how neat and how interesting and how connected the message is with us. The reading today, I put to you, continues the theme from last week's reading. The path to the cross, the path to heaven. And in one single sentence in the gospel, Luke establishes for us the point. He says this: the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to listen to him. But the Pharisees and scribes began to complain, saying, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." The sentence beginning this reading brings out that issue of Jesus and the table of fellowship. Jesus welcomes everyone to the table. A familiar phrase for us, we use that when we have communion. And that's what he's doing here. And it's in direct contrast to what the Pharisees, the scribes, those who chose words over actions. The prodigal son. Let's just take a few points out of this, and then I'll see if I can weave it back in and make some sense. The younger son dares to ask for his inheritance. And that's a shocker. It's probably a shocker at any time. We've heard of parents saying to their children, "I'm giving you your inheritance now." But not often will a child or an offspring go to the parent and say, "Give me my inheritance now." I know if I'd said that to my dad, I can imagine what the answer would have been, verbally and physically. And then the second surprise, if you want, is the oldest son says nothing about this. The father, the third surprise, the father goes along with it and divides up everything between the two. The younger son takes his possessions, let's say for the sake of argument, he turns it into cash and he spends it frivolously, as we could have predicted as the story was going, and he ends up tending to swine, which was really the bottom barrel of jobs, and is nearly starving. In fact, he talks about eating food that was given to the swine. If even the poorest of the poor would never eat that. So that's how desperate he was. The fifth surprise, he returns with a plan to work in his family home, but not as the son, but simply as a servant. But the real surprise isn't that, it's his father's greeting. Father welcomes him, gives him his own coat, gives him the family ring, and gives him sandals to wear in the house. And that's significant because that defined the family members of the house versus the servants who walked in bare feet. And then the father doesn't stop there. He holds a feast. And when you hear about the fatted cow, that means the whole village would be invited to the feast. And it doesn't end there. The seventh surprise, the older son coming back. His reaction is bitter. Listen to what he says. "All these years I slaved for you and never disobeyed one of your commandments." And it boils down to Jesus' table of inclusive fellowship. We have the runaway, the compassionate father, and then in the crowd Jesus is talking to the tax collectors and the sinners. Now the scribes and Pharisees in this imagery, I think this is magnificent how Jesus does this. The scribes and Pharisees fit the imagery of the oldest son, who saw their relationship with the father as one of slavery. And it's a parody of the misguided sense of religion, that you are a slave, you are not a child of God. It's really interesting. And Paul, in writing to the Corinthians, he says to them, listen, you gotta get rid of the bitterness in your lives. Like, don't be like the oldest son. Get rid of the bitterness and be like the father. And be welcoming. And I see this for us as Christ the servant. At Christ the servant, it's the heaven-hell scenario again. It's continuing on from next week. And one of the phrases that comes out, or the thoughts rather, that comes out to me is, we risk being as bitter as slaves and are outside the circle of dance if we choose to be the oldest son. Keep that statement in mind. The great scholar and holy person, Julian of Norwich, said, in describing God, actually says this, and I think it's pretty good. Completely relaxed and courteous, he himself was the happiness and peace of his dear friends, his beautiful face radiating measureless love like a marvelous symphony. Wow, I kind of wish I'd said that. It's such a beautiful way to describe God. But sometimes, I think in our journey, we drift away from basking in this beautiful symphony. Sometimes we let, and I say we, because I'm part of this too, we let bitterness or self-pity or anger, and we have that, it incapacitates us. We can't seem to let it go. And when we do that, we're choosing the dance of the older brother. And I guess, to put it into real perspective, ask yourselves this question. There you are at the banquet room. Now, are you sitting in the banquet room amidst all that great joy, pouting, waiting for the Father to come and try to coax you because you feel you've been cheated? But we know life is unfair, right? Remember Pauline, how with Courtney especially, our youngest daughter, that's not fair. And we never thought we'd reduce ourselves to saying life is not fair. I think that lasted maybe 3 weeks. And then but life is not fair. And I suspect from the smiles on many faces, we've used it and we've heard it. The great Swiss psychologist Alice Miller suggests that the primary task of the second half of life is that of grieving. I read that, I thought, that's kind of interesting. I wonder what that means. Well, she says we need to grieve, or the bitterness and anger that comes from our wounds and disappointments, our bad choices and broken dreams, will overwhelm us. It'll overwhelm us with life's sense of unfairness. And she offers a solution, and it's pretty simple. Life is unfair. Don't try to protect yourself from its hurts. You've already been hurt. Accept that, grieve for it, and move on to rejoice the dance. In the end, It's because we are wounded and bitter that we worry about God's justice. And this is where the heaven-hell scenario rolls comfortably in. We worry that maybe God's justice will be too lenient. We worry that the bad will not be fully punished. We worry that there may not be a hellish reward for those who should go there. We're worrying about something that's totally beyond our control. We learned last week that that's God's domain. We can't control that. I mean, can you imagine in our prayers saying, I really hope you punish that person for having done whatever? Oh, wow. But we need to focus on our own capacity to forgive, to let go of our hurts. And I like the positive aspect, to delight in life, to give others a sheer gaze of the admiration of the world around us. To be fit for heaven, we must let go of our bitterness. And I say to be fit for heaven, we must let go of hell. Like the older brother, maybe the problem is ultimately not the excessive love that is shown someone else. The problem is we haven't heard or understood God's words. God's words, my child, you have always been with me, and all I have is yours. But you and I should be happy and dance because your younger brother was dead and has come back to life. And I guess the message for us, to sum it up in a very short phrase, embrace the dancing path to heaven. Because each of you, each of us has that power.